because this next one is going to be very interesting, I think, for a lot of people. I'd like to introduce Anna Ware. She's a speech language pathologist. She works with a couple PURA individuals here in the Chicago area. She specifically focuses on communication. And so she's going to give a great overview of communication options, and take it away, Anna.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, let's see if this, oh, we're doing the Zoom on there. Let me know if you can't hear me either. And I'm going to kind of be moving around so I can see the slide as I go. And I'm doing Canva, so it's a little different than the other ones. That's what I wanted to test. So I'll give you the points when I'm ready. But before you do that, I just wanted to share that you can scan that QR code on the bottom right if you want a copy of this slide, which we can pull up again later. But at the end, I have some QR code that you might want to save for later that link you to all the different core boards. And I do have the core boards here available. This is free. I got them from our local rep here in Chicago. And there's some kinetic sand and crayons that she gave me to pass out. And then there are a few devices here that if you want to come look and fit your hands and eyes on different things, please do, or even just questions and brainstorming, because everybody is unique on what their different needs are. So we will go to the next slide. Think it away. Towards me. Oh, towards you. Okay, so this is me. I'm in Chicago. I have been a speech therapist for 15 years. And then just natural being in the field of Chicago, I've worked with two PURA clients. I know Tilly and Christopher very well. And ironically, they're both on accent devices, which is it's this one right here from PRC. I've worked in a lot of medical, well, not a lot, but I've worked in a medical setting that has a lot of different settings within it. And I've worked with many complex bodies, complex communicators. I've worked closely with occupational therapists and physical therapists. So looking at access is something that I love to problem solve and think through, because I know, especially with the PURA syndrome, the access isn't the easiest part. It's not as easy as just like touching and pointing sometimes. So for example, hopefully Christopher, you don't mind me sharing because you have your device there. He uses his hand and he uses a black screen, and it has more of a high contrast symbol, and it's set up to have, he has a tactile key guard. So when he touches it, it helps give you, it's the same concept when you're typing and you feel that little bar on your pointer fingers. It gives you the tactile cue that, oh, I'm kind of in the right spot. And then there's Tilly that uses eye gaze access, which is a completely different skill set, but also focusing on that motor plan. Like we can predict where the language will be. And when we have complex bodies, we need to allow, so the motor plan takes away like the complexity of always having to move, but also it gives us, because when you put in the motor part on top of the linguistic complexity, that's a lot to ask of anybody. So if we're trying to, okay, first I need to get my hand, I need to get my eye, oh, and then what the heck do I say? So we need to give ourselves the, the predictability. So I do feel like this motor plan system worked well for more complex bodies. And then Toby Dynavox did just come out with motor plan set kind of off of the PRC system within the last year or so. And I'm a passionate educator. I've taught at DePaul University and graduate students and professional conferences. So I love sharing the information. And I think the AAC community is awesome because we want you to have the information. We want you to be able to communicate, and we all need to be able to communicate however is easiest, because if it's hard, we're not gonna communicate. We're not gonna want to do it. So we need to find ways. It's very strengths-based focus. So we'll go to the next slide. Just to give us a preliminary shared definition, augmentative alternative communication. So augmentative means any communication that adds to a person's speech. We all do it. So I use my hands to talk, or I'll use an emoji when I'm texting. So it's any way to increase your speech, or a lot in the autistic population. There might be times when I just can't talk right now, like over sensory overload, which I think sensory needs is very real also in PURA population. When you have complex bodies, sensory overload happens. I may not be able to always use my speech or use my voice. I need a way to augment what I'm saying, or an alternative way. So anything that is used to communicate besides speech. So hands, gestures, and we'll get more detail. And then the goal is communication, the ability to exchange your thoughts and ideas, the human basic need. Everybody communicates, no matter how complex your body is, no matter who you are, there is a need and you are communicating. And are we recognizing what that communication is, and are we hearing it, and how do we shape that and do that so more people understand it? Yeah, exactly. Next slide. Okay, so AAC includes all forms of communication beyond oral speech that is used to express thoughts, needs, wants, and needs. So anything besides speech. We'll go to the next slide. I keep him on his toes. So some forms of AAC. So when you're studying, and this isn't a well-studied in graduate school, like you'll meet speech pathologists that never had this in graduate school. And I feel like I've been on a mission to be like, this is what it is. This is how we do it. And a lot of people are afraid because technology changes, but this is just some foundational information. We have unaided, which is no tech. So that means just the person. We all use this. We all use head nods. We all use gestures. Then we have aided, where no batteries required. That's these paper type boards. That's using pod. And then there's aided, which is high tech. So that is the electronics, batteries required. You can have a very, very robust language system on a more compact system that can go with you. And pros and cons to everything. There is no one size fits all. So the next slide. So I feel like unaided is the unsung hero, because I think we're always thinking like, what is the biggest, what is the best, what is the new? But unaided communication involves vocalizations. Thinking about babies, you can tell when a baby's hungry or mad just by listening to their cry. And as we grow, exactly, and I could hear you are interested, and I appreciate this by listening to your voice. And we all have different ways of how we use our voice. We have facial gestures. We can tell by looking at someone, they are not interested in what I'm saying. I've taught many graduate students, and then just the silence of the room. And then there's manual signs. You probably, if anybody's been to a speech therapy session, you've been to the 101 where they're signing more and all done. So there's doing a lot of that manual gestures just to communicate and build that need. So that is a form. So when you have a therapist saying, I don't do AAC, they do, because I guarantee you they're doing that. And then even eye blinks, or that's another way. You know, I've worked with a lot of lock-in patients and ALS clients. Like, there's a way to as long as it's like a consistent way of communicating, maybe they're blinking their eyes. Like, when you hear what you want, oh, I see you're like squeezing your eyes closed, and like, oh, maybe that's the way you're telling me that's what you want when you hear that, and I'm acknowledging that form. So this is a way that everybody can do. And if you're familiar with POD, this is a 30-minute talk, so I can't get into detail on everything. There's so much to share, but POD is a low-tech, systematic, organized language system. And one of their big takeaways is being able to do a head nod to confirm. And so even shaping that, oh, I saw you shake your head. Yes, you're telling me that's the one I want. Or a lot of times, and Christopher, I'm calling you out on this, you'll look away and turn your head if it's not what I want or I'm not interested. And that is a legit, acceptable way of communicating. And I'm going to accept that. And I'm going to also be like, oh, I saw you look away. I'm not going to make you do this, or I know that's not what you want. So this is a place to start with everybody, because when you're acknowledging how someone's communicating, you're building connection, you're building meaning and shaping a consistent form of communication. So then that leads us to low tech, which is where, okay, we've got some unaided. We got a way to communicate with us, you know, with just the body, which is great. In any position, we can use our body. Low tech is where we're building more with a systematic language with paper. So that could be on here, and the links that I'll have provided. So like this is a flip book where it has like the words you can flip to. It's got the core words. It can be a pod system, which I see right here, Christopher, if you want to look at it. It's a systematic, organized way of language that you might be using that unaided way to communicate. So like you hear what you want, you're nodding your head, or you might be pointing to it. There's letter boards. So anything that's paper-based that doesn't require electronics. And then I think we get to what the more traditional way, when people hear AAC, they think more of these high-tech electronics. So when this is insurance, and I had a question about this, insurance funds this stuff. Like, do not be told that you cannot get this funded by insurance. There's ways to work around this. There are grants. There's a very supportive community for AAC, but it falls under durable medical equipment. 92610 is the code, but it's electronic, it's synthesized, it has a robust vocabulary. So you don't have to have hundreds of pages. It can all be compact into your tablet. What makes it a speech generating device is that synthesized speech. So if you type out letters, it's going to speak what you type. Versus a recorded device, which is kind of phased out. There used to be this, like, depending on some of the audience, recorded devices like the Go Talks where you would record your voice on there. That's kind of faded out with iPads being so accessible. So the synthesized one, and it can be computers, it can be phones, it can be larger IAs, stuff like that. So the purpose of AAC is not to find a technological solution for communication problems. Like, I'm not trying to find the best fit. My job as a speech pathologist is to know what's out there. My job is to know what language systems could support you. So I'm kind of the running Rolodex of information. And then a speech pathologist will do a strengths-based assessment, a needs assessment on like, what can you do? And then find a system that could be a good start. And we trial things like that because it's all trial and error. So our goal is that we are enabling individuals to efficiently and effectively engage in a variety of interactions and participate in activities of their choice. Like, that's the core of being human. We want to be able to tell people we love them. I want to be able to tell you, I don't like that. So we want to be able to connect, and it's important for caregivers and the person that might have more of a challenge in communicating. The learning needs, it can get easy because you might be handed this device, or you start working with this device and you want to cue them, be like, okay, press the button here, do this. But we have to learn that we start communication down here. This is our hierarchy, that our AAC learners, they need a lot of all of this before we can get to like, okay, tell me this, do this. Because how many times have you been told that you're doing something and you don't want to do it? Or you can just get so tired, told to do something, and immediately it's not what you want to say or what you want to do. So the core of it is building relationships and connections, like responding when someone says. And I've heard often, even like Tilly's family, when like she's upset and crying, they say, thank you for telling me. Like, it's important that you can express even when you're frustrated, and thank you for sharing that, and you're honoring that and moving forward with that. Modeling without expectations. So thinking of learning the second language. If you're not hearing other people use it, you're not able to practice it and hear it. So if we need to model how we're expecting our learner to communicate. So we're going to be using the words just as much, if not actually more than them to begin with, because there's a learning curve. And we're going to be modeling it and saying all the words on here that we're saying, and we're not expecting anything in return. We're not expecting them to repeat what we're saying. We're just having them listen and observe and be like, oh, wow, okay, I can do this. And just make it more. Having siblings model, that's a big motivator. Having peers, everybody around you. And then having it response to any communication. So thinking, oh, they're not even looking at it, or they hit it, that's not what they meant. Thinking about, we need to respond to any AAC. We need to make it meaningful, so understand that they're impacting their environment, that they have a meaningful part of this communication and this, in this setting, family unit, as they're all loved ones of PURA syndrome. So you're part of this immediate family. And then natural targeted feedback. So do you mind if I use your example? So she was just sharing how like my daughter will go, and saying like that, that's her way, but us even vocalizing, oh, I just heard you say, I'm taking that as a yes, and that's what you want. And maybe you're giving choices, but I didn't hear you say that. So I'm taking it as you don't want. And then you can learn, like I do a lot of like, let's say music choices, and I'll pick a song I like and maybe a song I know they'll like. But if they say, on the thing they don't like, ideally they'll learn not to do that. But I'm communicating what I heard as their way of accepting it. It might be a head nod. It could even be like an arm. Like I've had cerebral palsy users a lot of times moving their arms up consistently, and that's their way of communicating. And I can say, oh, I saw the arm go up. You know what? It's always going up when I bring out this toy that you seem to really enjoy. And you can shape that into, you're impacting your communication environment because I'm seeing a consistent way of how you're communicating. And then we can get to prompts and the cues of like, okay, tell me what you want, when they already know the system, when they've used it before. And it becomes, and same with you with like a speaking child, you would be like, please tell me not whining or crying or, how it is, but you have to make sure they know their system and how they're communicating. So we'll go to the next slide. So communication functions. A lot of times we'll see where we get into the I want. And we want to get away from that, because thinking of all the different ways we communicate, we want to compliment, we want to tell on someone, especially if there's any siblings or peers around. We want to share information. We want to express an opinion, and maybe it's not always a good opinion. Maybe I'm bored because I'm sitting here and I want to express myself. I want to say a joke. I want to ask questions. I want to negotiate. I have a 4 and a 7-year-old, and the negotiations are wild that they come up with. And it's a very typically developing thing, like, okay, I'll do this for that. So even thinking about all the variety of things we communicate, and it's got to be beyond of like, I feel and what I want, but the broad scope of everything. And these are the things that you're then modeling. So like if you're frustrated or, or you have an opinion, those are the things you're using the device or your low tech that you're modeling. Or you can say, I just yawned because I'm so tired. So they're also seeing other ways of how to communicate beyond the traditional speech ways. So I just want to emphasize that your mindset matters. The mindset of your team, your school team, your therapy team, your professional medical doctors, it matters. I've heard a lot of this over the years. Are you thinking, or have you heard, they aren't intentional in what they say. They're just hitting the buttons. They're just playing around. I wish they would look at it. Oh, that's too complex for them. Oh, we don't want to give them too many buttons. Or I just have no idea if this is the right system and it's too much work. Or there are other ones out there you've heard? I feel like there's a lot. I feel like you'll just get a lot, or just like you're the one having to educate the team too, and like having to provide the information, because as the caregiver, you're like, I need this information. Which is, this whole conference is phenomenal that you are organizing this and collaborating all over the world and seeking the information and then bringing that information to the other partners of your loved one's team. It's important to share that. So when you hear these mindset type of things, we then want to shift it. We want to reframe. We want to provide the wonder. You know what? All children babble when learning to speak. When they're just pressing buttons and exploring, they're babbling. And you think about a typical developing child, they don't start speaking, like the milestone is like one word at 12 months, but it's really like 12 to 15 months. By 2 years, maybe they're putting 2 words together. And think of all the language input they have heard during that year and that 2 year. They're being provided constant modeling, language input on the way that they're expected to do speech. So we need to make sure we're educating and thinking about that, let alone we might have a complex body. We may have a body that doesn't just let us like calm. We have sensory overload. Our body might not just let us touch the screen easily. Like there's a lot of things and we need to give it time and allow them to be on their time. And thinking, even reframing, you know, I can't read their mind. Maybe this is what they want to say. Maybe they think this is fun. Maybe they've never heard this word before, or maybe this is what they want to talk about because you know, the AI technology is getting there with reading minds, but we're not mass producing that yet on reading minds. Thinking about, it takes me a while to learn something new, especially when the technology is changing, and let alone if I couldn't read to help guide myself. So give them time to explore and see what's on these devices, or even finding ways of like, hey, you know what? Mom really jumps really fast when I do this certain scream and I get a big reaction. So they're learning and seeing like this is a way of communicating that gets me something. I wonder if I respond to what they're saying, they can learn these words have meaning. So if they're saying, oh, they don't know, but let's say they're saying banana peel, banana peel, banana peel, maybe you shape it and you start talking about banana peels, or even you sing the banana peel song, you know, like you're shaping it into more of what the language means, or you talk about it and give them the opportunity to learn meaning of what that language is. And even if they aren't looking at, they're listening. So I can narrate what I'm saying. So like on the accent devices, I'm gonna hit this apple. Let's see, I think I might have food. Oh, there's my word eat. Oh, there's all my snack words. You know, I'm talking out what I'm hitting and saying on there and navigating it. And there's times when I don't want to talk and I just want to observe. So allowing that freedom of like, I've got nothing to say, and that's okay. You can go from there. So the big takeaway too is presume potential. Always presume they are capable of understanding and learning. This encourages more potential growing. Treat all forms of communication with respect, whether they come from speech, gestures, or an AAC device. Your child has valuable ideas, thoughts to share, and continue to advocate for them in those circles that might not be, you're like, I think there's more out there. I think we can do better. Keep pushing. And it's hard as a parent because you're like, I've done this information. I'm getting the pushback from the experts, but I've heard and I've read that there's more potentially, and we can do this. Your child has valuable ideas, and we want them to be heard and we want them to be shared within every environment they're in. So the easy first steps I like to start with are core words, which I don't have time to go into today, but core words are 80% of what we communicate are 250 words. Out of all the words in the language, these core words, like the word want and need and stop, because you can make a car go, you can make a car, you can go to an appointment. So you teach these really powerful words, which is how these are all set up with core words. You can learn a lot of language. Literacy. All people can learn to read. I brought this book that's like the go-to book for AAC users, Comprehensive Literacy for All. There's ways to make alternative keyboards and pencils for like scanning, they call it, but keep giving access to literacy. Keep modeling the phonics. Keep doing that. And then modeling, just like whatever system you get, just model, model, model. You are the language givers. Don't expect anything in return, but be the person that's giving the language and modeling that. On here are all these core boards that you can download. So the QR codes will take you right to the website. Satillo has a lot, like those flip books. You can print them, laminate them. You can tell your team like, hey, I'm done with nouns. We're not going to noun town anymore because I could say watermelon door, light bulb all day, and I'm not going to be able to get my lunch and go somewhere and, turn the lights off. We need to have core words, and we need to be modeling it very early on. And there are no prerequisites to AAC. Like, you don't have to be able to do something to get somewhere. Everybody should be introduced to language. Like, you don't not talk to a baby even though you don't expect them to talk back. And then another slide. But I listed some free, this is an AAC app that you kind of have to build up to it, but they have a really nice free light version. That's great. The full app is $120. You can download some core pages. But if you just want something simple to trial, it'd be on an iPad. And then I'll bring up the QR code again so you can have this at the end. There's Tilly using her accent device with her toys she picked. And then these are the different devices that PRC has, and Satilla is their sister company. So alternative access is available on the PRC devices on there. We'll do the next one. And then Tobii Dynavox. So TD Snap is free to everybody that's a speech pathologist. So if you have a speech therapist that says, I don't have a budget for AAC, false, you do. Free cord boards, TD Snap offers it for free. They give everybody a free 60-day trial. So if you want to test it out, you can put it on your iPad. You can connect with your local solutions consultant and they can trial different equipment. And it's easy to edit. So there's lots of options on there. And then Think Smartbox. Grid 3 has some really great options to explore too that you could meet with them, and they have free trials as well. You could download and look at on the computer. And finally, literacy. So these, I gave you the link how to make this book. It's from Linda Burkhart, who's part of the POD program. And you could print this off, laminate it, and use it as a partner-assisted scanning type keyboard. And then these two websites are phenomenal. So many resources on there for literacy and phonics, and meant for people with disabilities learning how to read and what to do with it. And it's all based off of this book. And then the last one. And just keep modeling without expectations. Just keep giving them the language. Focus on teaching and exposing rather than testing. Don't test, just give information. And more language, the better. And that's how we're learning. So what is the easiest way to communicate? So remember, it's okay if you don't know all the answers. Just keep modeling and listening to your child, and we'll get there. So I also have my own private practice, AAC Aware, Anna Aware. And then if you have questions or if you want to consult on anything, feel free to email me. My email's on there, Anna with 2 N's at aacaware.com. And I'd be happy to brainstorm with you and come up with some ideas and see what we can connect with more. So it's a pleasure to be here. I have to leave around 2:30, but I have devices here and there's a 15-minute break. So if you have questions, feel free to come up, or if you want to ask to the mass audience, that's fine too.
Does anyone have, oh, good. Oh yeah, I thought everyone was asking questions.
All the questions. We're a sign language friendly group.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. My daughter is 54 years old and she has had no communication devices. When she was a child, we tried a few things, and she used to do tap on a card, or she uses sometimes the sound, those big buttons,
Yeah.
but not consistently. That's the thing. We have been having problems getting her enough speech therapy and getting her devices, because the argument is she's not consistent. And for a long time, they told me it was because she doesn't know cause and effect. I have learned differently. And I hope you all learn your child knows cause and effect, at least at the right time. Don't let them tell you otherwise. And so what do you do? How do you answer the question about consistency? I told people speech therapists or sessions, just push through the consistency. But how do you get that across?
It's a very old school of thought. I hope is shifting of like, you have to prove yourself to be given communication. But those that speak, we haven't proven anything to be able to articulate our words or have the air in our lungs to get our voice on. So I think it goes back, and there's a lot of research out there too. I feel like when I get that pushback, and especially like insurance companies, I'm citing research. I'm citing that you have to have access to communication to learn communication. Eye gaze, there's a learning curve. Like it's different than just like looking at the room. You have to be able to focus, you have to be able to dwell. I have ALS clients, Lou Gehrig's disease, that are learning access, and they're like, it's hard. It's even like if we're using it, it's hard. So you just need to, I've written a lot of addendums and pushed back a lot of insurances, and the squeaky wheel usually goes, or there's other ways like grants. If you're younger enough through insurance, or school districts could help with that, but you have to have access to it to learn it. And even if your access method is something like eye gaze, you need it to play games. You might be playing games for like a year or more, but you're learning how to control the screen with your eyes, which is far more complex than we think about. Like it sounds easier than it is, but it's very, and your family's gone through the whole, like, my gosh, even to think what an iPad is now versus when your daughter was younger. So there's a lot of change and a lot of shift in accessible equipment too, with the iPad, like making it more mass produced. Any other questions or concerns or examples you want to share? Okay, if there's not.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank